Dave Brown was sitting in his living room chair. Opposite his chair was an empty couch. Between his chair and the couch stood a coffee table with 3 champagne glasses, 1 full, 2 empty. Next to the table was a bottle of champagne in an ice bucket. Anyone watching him relax at 7:02 p.m. might have been a little concerned when he clearly said, "Yes, I hear her car in the driveway." But there were no observers. Dave was alone in the room. He continued to sit relaxed when the front door opened. He couldn't be seen from where he was sitting, but he immediately heard his wife's voice. "Where are you, Dave?" "In the living room, Deb." Dave quickly stood up when his wife entered the archway. She was holding the hand of a man about 5 years younger than her 49 years. He was slim, of medium height, dressed in a business suit. In her other hand, she held an orange A4 envelope. Dave, this is Michael." "Michael, this is my husband, Dave." Noting that she was averting her eyes and seemed nervous, Dave took 3 steps forward and warmly shook the uninvited guest's hand. "I'm very pleased to meet you, Michael. Do you mind if I call you Mike?" "Not at all, sir. May I offer you a glass of champagne? Please, take a seat." Dave watched as 2 very embarrassed people sat on the couch and took the offered glasses after he filled them. "Cheers. Now, could you tell this simple soul what's going on?" Deborah and Mike exchanged looks. Mike subtly nodded and squeezed her hand. Dave, it's not very pleasant to talk about this, so I'll just say it directly. Michael and I have fallen in love. I would like a divorce so we can get married." She paused, expecting her husband's anger. She lifted her gaze from the floor to see Dave's expression. It was going to be awful, she just knew it. She did not expect his face to remain neutral. Unconsciously, she moved a bit closer to Michael. "All right, Deb, are these the divorce papers?" Deb looked up in astonishment again. She had rehearsed this scene in her head many times, but never, not even in her wildest dreams, had it gone like this. She looked at Michael and tried to convey with her eyes, "I don't know what to say." He took the envelope from Deb and placed it on the table. "Yes, Dave, that's correct. I think you'll find them very reasonable. Deb is not asking for anything from you except her car. Included in the packet is her statement renouncing this house, your car, all your joint assets, and your pension fund. Everything is signed and notarized on our side. I must warn you that I am a lawyer, so everything is in order, but don't hesitate to hire your own representative to reassure yourself. Well, I must say, you both are very generous." Deb looked very anxious, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. "It was Mike's idea, Dave. He actually insisted. He said it's bad enough that he's stealing a wife without taking your hard-earned assets. This was by no means my motivation, but Mike is quite wealthy. Even without your money, we will have more than we ever had together. Maybe things would have been different if you had found a job after the kids grew up and helped with the finances, Deb." Deb looked down again. "So, Mike, is your wife about to give a similar speech or has she already received one?" My wife died 8 years ago. I'm a widower." "I'm sorry to hear that, truly." "Thank you, Dave. The year or so after was incredibly painful, but as they say, time heals all wounds. Listen, I'm really sorry about this, but I met Deb, and she was like the missing half of my soul. I never thought I'd feel whole again. I wanted to tell you that I've been in love with your wife for several months." "That's fine, Mike. I never hold grudges. Please, marry her with my blessing." Mike and Deb exchanged stunned looks. Deb, because everything was not at all as she expected. Then she felt a huge relief. Months ago, she had convinced Michael that her marriage with Dave was falling apart. That they had tried to save it, but the chances were slim. She knew that Dave's reaction was a weak spot in her plan, which might make Mike realize that things weren't quite right. That's why she begged Mike to do this without a face-to-face meeting. Mike insisted that real men solve problems face-to-face. He did not yield to her pleas. Mike was stunned because even after Deb told him that her marriage was on its last legs, he expected a more angry response. From Deb's descriptions, he had a mental image of Dave. From what she had said, he was a big, uneducated man accustomed to solving problems with his fists. Mike had hesitated over the idea of bringing a bodyguard tonight but ultimately dismissed the thought. Deep down, he thought that if the aggrieved husband hit him a bit, it might ease his own conscience. His own sense of decency weighed on him. "So, Deb, I suppose you met Mike at one of your girlfriend's parties?" Deb nodded toward the coffee table. One of the girls' nights out, which you assured me were completely harmless and not a threat to our marriage when I asked. This time Deb nodded to the floor. I guess that's a lesson for you, Mikey boy. Mike looked at Deb. Her gaze shifted to a spot on the floor a little further away from Mike. So what happens now with people? Come on, Deb, you must have a plan. You're giving me the house, so I assume you were planning to pack your things and move in with him. I won't stand in your way. I was going to do that tomorrow while you were at work. By tomorrow, the locks will be changed. I'm sure your friend, the lawyer, would agree it's a wise move on my part. It's easier if you do it now, right? Deb and Mike stood up to go upstairs. How about a talk, Mike? Deb can start packing. Come on, Mike, let's chat. I think you owe me at least that. Deb was torn between wanting to avoid this truly awkward situation and the need to witness everything that was said. Eventually, Mike made the decision for her by sitting back down. Go ahead, Deb. I promise not to harm him. I just want to talk. Until we're divorced, I feel responsible for your safety. I just want to make sure he takes your interests to heart. Besides, you made the decision to leave me. I see no point in trying to dissuade you from it. Our marriage, clearly, is dead. Both men watched as she went up the stairs and disappeared. I must say, you're being very reasonable, Dave. It's all right, Mike. Between us, I haven't felt Deb's love for about a year now. I guess that's when you two met. It will indeed be a relief. I have no desire to doom us both to a loveless marriage. That's very kind of you, Dave. Always a pleasure, Mike. Now, as a lawyer, you know that whenever you sell a car or a house, you are legally obliged to disclose any known faults to the new owners. Mike laughed. Well, slavery is dead, and I don't think Deb would appreciate being considered property that needs a transfer of ownership, but I understand what you mean, Dave. Dave also smiled. He rightly guessed that Mike was a smart and decent man. All right, now, please believe that what I'm about to say is not dictated by any ill will. I just want to point out some of Deb's shortcomings that may not be apparent after a year of acquaintance. Besides, her future happiness is important to me. After all, I've loved her for 27 years. I would also like to share everything I tried to do to make her happy, but obviously failed. This way, you'll know not to waste your time on the same things. Mike nodded. He knew that what was about to be shared might not be completely altruistic in intent, but he felt obligated to listen to this innocent man. Right, I assume Deb went back to the pills? Mike nodded again, feeling a bit uneasy. It was tantamount to admitting that he was sleeping with this man's wife. Yes, she's on pills. I had no idea she had ever stopped. She was on pills when we met, but about 6 to 12 months after we got married, she quit them. She said they suppressed her sexual appetite. Since then, it's been condoms for me. Can't stand those damn things. They take all the spontaneity away, and I don't know about you, but I try my best to do without them. Yes, I know what you mean, Dave. Later, when we decided to stop at 2 children, she started using condoms as an excuse not to make love as often. I begged her to go back on the pill, but she refused, saying she didn't want to swallow artificial chemicals every day. Since then, our lovemaking decreased from several times a week to a few times a month, and then to 0. Yes, about a year ago. Mike did not respond. He knew that Deb was very careful about what she ate and chose chemical-free options wherever possible. Sex with her was still exciting and happened at least 3 times a week, even with restrictions on their meetings. I know it's very ungentlemanly, Mike, but does she swallow your, well, you know? Mike found this question very awkward. People of his class did not talk about such things. He involuntarily looked away. I understand. Yes, I remember what she was like when Deb and I were dating. And now, please remember, I'm saying all this without any malice. If I were selling a car that I knew would throw a wheel 6 months after I got rid of it, I would warn you about that too. Deb hasn't swallowed for me since we got married. Actually, I think it's been about 18 months since we last had oral sex, and soon after that doggy style stopped too. We completely stopped having sex until recently. I just got tired of being knocked back, and I stopped asking. Maybe you'd like to note in your diary to watch for any sudden drops every month or so. Dave paused to let Mike add anything, but he did not take the opportunity. And here's another thing I noticed only a couple of years after our wedding. One day I looked around and suddenly realized that almost everything I owned before Deb had disappeared. The bed, clothes, couch, and photos of old girlfriends, though, to be honest, I found them in the attic. I don't know if all women do this, or if it's just Deb, but she seemed to want to clear the nest of any previous female influence. Again, Dave paused, and again, Mike remained silent. He thought about his new bed and sheets. Then he recalled his conversation with Deb a week ago about the portrait of his first wife. The woman he had dearly loved until circumstances erased her from his life. I hope you're better at detecting her lies than I was, Mike. Just 3 weeks ago, I asked her if she still loved me and if things were okay between us. She looked me right in the eyes and said, yes. She did what she always does, looked into my eyes until I broke eye contact. I can't believe it only took 3 weeks for her to fall out of love so profoundly. Mike was slightly staggered by the unexpectedness of this conversation and all the information Dave was trying to impart. Something in those last 2 sentences alarmed him, but he didn't have time to pinpoint the source. So, he focused on the only aspect he could grasp. Don't worry, Dave, I'm a lawyer. I've spent 20 years learning to recognize liars. They always give themselves away. Good. Again, just a few tips to take or leave. Watch if she takes off her rings when she goes to visit her sister. You might want to check her lingerie drawer. I advise you not to blindly trust her as I did. I thought she was utterly incapable of deceit, but clearly, I'm an idiot. What else can I say? Oh yes, if she follows her usual pattern, she'll probably stop going to the gym in about 6 to 12 months and gain some weight. At this point, Dave stood up, took a photo album off the shelf, and started flipping through the pages. Here are a couple of photos from 2 years ago when she started going to bachelorette parties. As you can see, her face and butt were plump. But after 2 children, who would be surprised? Mike turned a few pages and saw a plumper version of his fiancée with much less makeup than he had ever seen. He was slightly stunned by the difference a little makeup could make. He continued flipping through the pages. Is this Deb's mother? I see a strong resemblance. Yes, that's right. Just a moment. As you can see, she was a beautiful woman. This is her around 50. She was a very striking woman. Dave picked up another album and opened it to a page. He waited for Mike to state the obvious. Good Lord, how old is she here? About 55. She was one of those women who, once they hit menopause around 52 or 53, quickly lost their looks. However, she accepted it very gracefully, simply saying that she thanked God for the beauty she had been blessed with for so long. Dave watched as Mike alternately examined the 2 photos. Now I promise to tell you about all my mistakes that made her unable to love me. I suggest trying a different approach. Mine was clearly unsuccessful. Dave paused to pour some champagne. About 25 years ago, she wanted a wedding. I tried to object, saying it was better to invest the money in a house, but she said that if I truly believed we would be together forever, I wouldn't skimp on a day that was so important to her. If you want, I can find a copy of our wedding vows for you. From memory, we stuck to the traditional, to love, honor, and obey, and forsaking all others. If you try something different, maybe you'll fare better than I did. It might not matter much to you, but don't work your fingers to the bone and do a bunch of overtime to give her the flash house she's always dreamed of. It clearly didn't keep her legs together. In fact, we're probably here because I refused to pay for the facelift she wanted, preferring to invest the money in our retirement. She can be quite insistent when her heart is set on something. You've probably noticed. Mike nodded, wondering if this characteristic of Deb was really as admirable as he had thought until now. So, I thought I was being smart by inviting her to a monthly date to discuss everything about me or our relationship that starts to irritate or cause the slightest indignation. Our last date was less than a month ago, and she said nothing. A man of your caliber, I'm sure, can come up with something better. At that moment, Mike noticed a spark in Dave's eyes and suddenly realized what he was implying. Nevertheless, he made several good points. The idea that Deb was completely free from deceit strongly contradicted some of his own thoughts recently. He was so stunned by Dave's apparent amusement about the whole scenario that he again ignored the internal alarm signal. Dave continued speaking, despite the fact that they both clearly knew Deb had stopped descending the stairs, being within earshot. Watch for lists of things she plans to remove from the house. It's a good hint that she already despises the marriage and is looking for a replacement. It won't significantly change what happens, but it will allow you to prepare for the endgame she has planned, and prompt you to start digging for other evidence. Mike blinked and looked around. For the first time, he noticed the 3 champagne glasses and the ice bucket. Clear evidence that all 3 present knew about today's meeting in advance, when there were supposed to be only 2. His usually very observant nature had missed the clues. Dave watched Mike's eyes roam. Yes, I knew this would be today. Deb called me twice today to make sure I'd be home by 7. Mike shifted his gaze from Dave and looked where Deb was halfway down the stairs. Deb resumed her descent, clearly pretending she hadn't heard the last few minutes of conversation. Dave, do you want to talk about which of the family photos I can take now or some other time? Dave ignored her and leaned towards the couch across, never taking his eyes off his rival. The last thing I did wrong was forgive Deb when I first caught her cheating on our marriage. What? Asked Mike. No. Slipped from Deb's lips as she retreated into the kitchen. Yes, it was right after the birth of our second child. I forgave her because she and our counselor convinced me that it was a one-time mistake caused by postpartum depression. I often wondered if I was too soft on her. Maybe a firmer approach at the time could have prevented a recurrence. I justified my actions by thinking I was acting in the best interest of the children. They grew up to be good people, so I hope I did right by them. For her sake, I hope you will be generous enough to forgive her when your time comes. I don't know what to say, Dave. You don't need to say anything, Mike. Just answer me. Look into your heart and ask yourself if you would have forgiven your late wife if you had caught her having sex with someone else in your own bed. For the first time, Mike lost his composure. He leaned forward. From the corner of his eye, Dave noticed some movement and saw a pale-faced Deborah standing in the kitchen doorway. My wife would never have shown me such disrespect. We loved each other too. Wait a minute, you said, the first time Deb cheated on me, were there other times? No, just twice. Then and now. Deb burst out of the kitchen. No, she cried desperately. I'm finished packing, Mike. If you take my suitcases, we can get out of here right now. Calm down, Deborah. The last was said in a quiet but firm voice. Surprisingly, the voice belonged to Mike. Deb stopped in her tracks. Mike turned back to Dave. Deborah assured me that she was not unfaithful because you had an open marriage, Dave. Did she look you in the eyes when she told you that, Mike? Mike looked at Dave, then at a shrunken Deb, and back at Dave again. Dave saw a sudden realization in Mike's eyes that he was not as good at recognizing liars as he thought. What did she tell you about the state of our marriage, Mike? She said it had been shaky for several years, Dave. That you had been seeing a therapist for some time, but neither of you had any hope. Dave did not respond. He just looked at Mike as he continued speaking to fill the silence. Now, I think this doesn't quite match up with what you said about still going on dates and asking if she loved you. Dave continued to look Mike in the eyes. He chose exactly the moment when Mike realized that he had been played for a complete fool. An expression, easily interpreted as self-disgust, flashed across the face of the little man. Mike turned to a frozen Deborah. You damn scoundrel, you've turned me into the person I despise the most. A man who sleeps with other men's wives without their husband's knowledge. Upon hearing this statement, Deb fell to her knees. Mike suddenly lost his ability to speak and became interested in the same spot of the carpet that had once so charmed Deb. Finally, he composed himself and looked back at Dave. Please, Dave, you have to believe me, I had no idea. Don't worry, Mike, I told you she's a good liar. Lord, I wish she had told me we had an open marriage. Then I might have slept around last year. The deliberate use of humor in a very tense situation seemed to work. Mike relaxed slightly but remained silent. Does this mean the engagement is off? Yes, definitely. In that case, I want to introduce you to a couple of people. John, Alice. At that moment, the basement door opened. Hearing the noise, Mike turned and saw a young man and woman approaching. Mike, I want to introduce you to my son John and my daughter Alice. They were listening to our conversation through a microphone. John graduated from law school 2 years ago, and Alice earned her doctoral degree this year. John and Alice shook hands with a bewildered Mike. Then John picked up an envelope from the table and began to dispassionately examine its contents. Dave turned to his daughter. Do you believe me now, Alice? Yes, Dad. There's no doubt she's a cold, cunning schemer. All eyes turned at the sound of a groan. Deb was still on her knees, but now her head was resting on the floor. Sensing the silence, she lifted her head and met 4 accusing stares. She sprang up and ran out the front door. No one made the slightest attempt to stop her or follow her. John calmly finished reviewing the contents of the envelope. Looks like everything's in order, Dad. Good, thanks. Now, who wants a beer? This fizzy stuff is fine, but I need a beer to get rid of the taste in my mouth. I think it's time for me to go. Stay here, little Mikey. We still need to sort something out. Like what? Well, I might forgive you for sleeping with that dumb trash because she said she was in an open marriage and all that, but I need to decide whether to rip your head off and spit down your neck for trying to steal her. Mike looked at the other man, noting that he was a head taller and much larger. Then he looked into his eyes and saw the now familiar gleam. Dave decided to calm down a bit. John does the same work as you, Mike. By this time, Mike was no longer surprised that Dave knew so much about him. How's your current job, John? The hours suck and the pay is peanuts. Do you want to come and work with me? Hell, yes. Dave smiled. Then there's the question of supporting my ex-wife until she finds a job. She no longer has a home or money. With a growing sense of relief, Mike entered into the new topic. I'm very sorry, Dave. As soon as she lied to me, she broke the implied contract we had. In the event of a breach of contract, ownership reverts to the previous owner. Yes, but morally? Don't talk to me about morals. I'm a lawyer. John, do you have a dictionary? I have a vague idea of what that actually means. Everyone laughed. No, seriously, Mike, I think you should look after her until she gets back on her feet. If you play your cards right, you could pretend you're thinking about keeping her around and liven up your spirits in bed for a while. No, I can't do that. But I will make sure she's okay. Not for her, but for you. I admire mastery wherever I see it, and tonight I was completely outclassed, wasn't I? Have you ever thought about a career in law, Dave? The way you unbalanced me, turning negatives into positives and giving me no time to think, was worthy of the best prosecutor I've ever seen. Dave smiled modestly but said nothing. He loved his job and the people he worked with. So, 4 beers? For the first time during the evening, Dave looked away. Until he was sure that the tears accumulating at the corners of his eyes had disappeared, he would not look him in the eyes again. By this time, Deborah Brown was already 700 meters away, walking quickly and accelerating as if her heels were on fire. Story 2. Lisa, whom I have been married to for many, many years, works as an office manager at a software company from 9 to 6 every day. Since my work schedule is quite flexible, we gradually switched to having sex in the mornings. 3 or 4 times a week, I caress her slender body and she caresses me. We didn't experiment much in bed, but I was quite satisfied with that. However, I noticed that over the last year Lisa has become more passionate in the bedroom. She has also become more aggressive about the little things at home. Maybe it's because of her promotion at work? There were quite a few signals indicating a possible affair, so I hired a private detective. It only took him a week to get concrete results. Just like that. Usually, we talk on the phone every day around 10 in the morning. Today was no different, at least in terms of the timing of our usual call. She picked up the phone before it could go to voicemail. Hey, handsome, how's your day going? I suppose it's going quite well, how about yours? Not bad. Don't forget that our Jessica has a soccer match today. I've noted it in my calendar. I was thinking, we've never talked about what kind of funeral each of us wants. There was a brief pause. Probably Lisa just didn't expect such a topic in our usual domestic conversation. Tim, are you hiding something from me? Did the doctor tell you some bad news? No, sorry. I'm completely fine, but it occurred to me that I don't know whether you would prefer to be cremated or buried. If you choose cremation, what should I do with the ashes? If you want to be buried, where? You probably don't know these answers about me either, right? Tim, you've chosen a terrible topic. Do we really have to talk about this now? When is a better time? I will probably outlive you, so there's no point in discussing what to do with my carcass. Let's focus on you. We are the same age, Tim. Women live longer. Why do you think you will outlive me? Well, your grandparents are dead, but mine are still alive. Besides, you know why most husbands die before their wives, don't you? No, I don't know. Why? Because they want to. Oh, things are that bad for you, poor thing. So, meet me halfway. Cremation or burial? Fine, if you insist, a burial. All right, where? I don't even know. Somewhere near our home. We've lived here almost 20 years. That makes sense. A simple marker or a larger headstone? A headstone. Let everyone say, here lies his better half. Hey, here's another thing. You know your CEO Bob. I hear his wife Sandy has terminal cancer. How old do you think they are? They must be over 60. Where did you hear about her illness? From Sandy herself. Did you know she's a passionate gun enthusiast? Oh, you should see her collection of pistols. She showed me one that barely fit in her purse. She claims it can make a hole in a door the size of a tennis ball. She says locks just fall apart. Think about it. If it can do that to a door, what can it do to a person? When did you see her? Lisa now asked, sounding worried. This morning, just before I called you. I had something to share with her. She asked if I could keep you at home. What? Your words make no sense. Why keep me? Indeed, when I showed Sandy the private detective's report about your long affair with Bob, she decided that her husband had betrayed her. Yes, and you betrayed her too. Since she only has a few months to live, she thought she wouldn't make it to court. Anyway, she was heading to your office and wanted me to keep you at home if possible while she took care of her Bob. Oh my God, Tim, how could you? I'll answer that question after you answer mine. Why? But never mind, it doesn't matter anymore. You better find some shelter. Please, Tim, make her stop. Forgive me. Sandy, stop, stop. Do you think she heard me? Lisa tried to say something through tears, but I wasn't listening anymore. Just like that, Lisa. I'm going to hang up since the sound of gunfire might disturb me. I think I'll enjoy cremating you and throwing your ashes in a portable toilet. Oh God. Of course, some things in life don't turn out the way you might wish. And tomorrow never comes.